Hello everyone. This is chapter 23 from my contemporary romance novel Under A Namibian Sky. Naomi was fast beginning to understand why Luca was so successful in business. He refused to accept no as an answer. With his devastating good looks and huge amounts of charm, it was easy to see how no one could resist him. Otayan had confirmed the information Naomi had given about Luca about the storm forming over the desert. But Luca was adamant about taking the dune buggy out for a test. He pleaded with Naomi, teasing her, cajoling her, and putting such comical faces that he had everyone around the lunch table in stitches. It was good to have her Luca back, but it concerned Naomi that they might get caught in the storm. Luca made light of it, assuring her the test would be quick but thorough. He wanted to report back to Armati HQ as soon as possible. That way, they could start production of the buggies at once. If the storm got closer, surely they could outrun it back to the lodge in the truck. Eventually, and against her better judgment, Naomi agreed. There were too many people and distractions at the lodge. Perhaps alone together in the desert, they'd finally be able to clear the air between them. Especially now Luca had asked Auntie Elsa for her hand in marriage. As soon as they'd finished eating, the other women excused them from staying for coffee after lunch. Luca sprinted to his room to change his shoes into sturdier desert boots. Naomi went to check which of the trucks was resilient enough to carry the dune buggy and had an enclosed cabin in case they needed protection against the storm. By the time Luca reappeared, suitably dressed, camera in hand, Naomi had already driven the truck into the pit. It allowed Luca to drive the buggy onto the truck easily. She'd arranged for coffee, snacks, and a cold dinner in case they got caught in the storm and couldn't make it back to the lodge. From experience, she knew these storms could be severe and last for several hours. The one she could see forming over the desert didn't look friendly at all. She'd made sure the walkie-talkie's battery was charged, though it would be useless in a storm, and packed torches. Luca's broad smile revealed his excitement as he drove the buggy onto the back of the truck. Naomi felt the truck give under the weight of the buggy. Luca secured the buggy with the strong straps the courier had left. He was still grinning as he slid into the seat beside Naomi. Leaning over, he gave her a quick, soft kiss on her cheek. "You're the best. I guess that's why I can't help wanting to marry you." About that, Luca turned to her, his eyes suddenly serious. "Don't say anything yet. Let's get out of here first." Realization dawned on Naomi. "You didn't really want to test the buggy today, did you?" "Oh yes, I do, but I also wanted to get you alone so we could talk. We should talk, shouldn't we? Especially now. There are too many people here." Naomi nodded in agreement and started the engine. She drove the truck out of the pit typically used to lower the vehicles when required. "So how big does the dune have to be to test the buggy?" Luca grinned, a wicked glint in his eyes. "As big as you can find. I want to give it a proper workout." Naomi couldn't help smiling at his boyish excitement. They drove in happy, companionable silence for a while. The surrounding dunes were getting bigger and bigger. When they reached one the size of a small mountain right ahead of them, Naomi slowed down. She pointed at it. "Will that do?" A whistle of awe left Luca's lips. "It's perfect. Can we get a little closer?" Naomi nodded, drove closer to the base of the dune and turned, so the back of the truck was pushing against the sand. It would make driving the buggy off the truck easier. Luca got out and used the truck's sides to pull himself along, slipping and sliding through the looser sand. Climbing the sand hill, he got onto the back, undid the straps that secured the buggy, got on and started the engine. The buggy roared its delight. Naomi got out to get a better view of Luca and the buggy. Luca reversed the buggy off the truck, its wheels spinning in the sand before they got a proper traction. Once off the truck, Luca turned the buggy around and drove along the base of the dune for a short while before getting ready to tackle the dune. Naomi could hear Luca's jubilant whooping as he drove the buggy up the steep hill of the dune. It slid this way and that at first, but soon Luca had the measure of the little vehicle. Naomi watched as Luca drove the buggy higher and higher until he reached the top of the dune. He stopped there. She knew what an amazing sight met him from that height. A light breeze had blown when they'd arrived, but it felt a little stronger now. Naomi squinted up into the sky. It was already a little darker. Thousands of tiny grains of sand were starting to obscure the sun as the wind picked up. There was still time before the storm hit. She reached inside the truck and grabbed Luca's camera. He brought the digital one. It was easier to use. She just had to point and press the button. The camera did all the work. As Luca drove the buggy along the edge at the top of the dune, Naomi took picture after picture of the gleaming buggy against the red dune, with the blue sky turning red above it. The zoom button brought Luca and the buggy nearer and clearer in the viewfinder. Trying to capture the action shots as Luca manoeuvred the buggy diagonally down the dune so it threw up streams of sand behind it was a little more challenging. But by the time he roared back toward the truck, she felt happy with the shots she'd captured. By now the wind had picked up. The grains of sand swirling inside the ever-increasing gusts were stinging her unprotected face, arms and legs. Naomi got back into the truck and closed both windows. Already a thin layer of red sand covered the bonnet of the truck. Through the back window, Naomi watched as Luca drove the buggy back onto the truck and secured it thoroughly with the strong straps once again. The wind was snatching at Luca's t-shirt as he worked and blew his hair into his eyes. When he opened the door to get in, he brought with him a burst of wind, the smell of sand, and the energy of his exhilaration. Luca's eyes were glittering and his smile stretched over his face. "Whew! That was fantastic! Did you see?" Naomi giggled as the infectiousness of his delight jumped into her body. She showed him the pictures she'd taken and was rewarded with his excitement. "These are great! Maybe we could use them in the marketing." "We?" "Sorry, I meant if you want my help, of course. I'd be happy to help with the marketing for the buggies at the lodge. I meant it when I said your photos were great, but we could get a professional photographer to do amazing action shots." "You do that? Oh, Luca, it would be lovely. Yes, please. But we may not need to hire a photographer. Have you ever seen Gerard's photos?" "The guide?" "Yes, him. His photos have won awards in magazines. We're lucky to have him. He could easily have been a professional photographer. And videographer, coming to think of it." Naomi looked deep into Luca's eyes. "Thank you so much for offering to help. I can't imagine Kerry having a problem with it." Luca became more serious as he put the camera away. "Amore, I know Kerry's your friend, and she's now the new manager at Desert Lodge. But soon it will be yours, no? I know it's difficult to think about that right now, but when the time comes, you may want to make different decisions than Auntie Elsa made." Luca was right. Naomi didn't want to think about the fact that soon she'd be the owner of Desert Lodge, the custodian of generations of staff who'd worked there, and the keeper of long-held traditions. Her conversations with Auntie Elsa had helped her to understand that death was just a part of life, and yet, would she be strong enough to face it? The only other person left on earth who knew her, who felt like family, was Kerry. "You mean get rid of Kerry? I'd never do that. Yes, she's my best friend, but I also think she's the best manager we've ever had. Auntie Elsa even said so herself. Luca touched her arm to emphasize his point. Oh no, I didn't mean getting rid of Kerry. I simply meant you might want to take a more hands-on approach to things, including the image of the place. And if you want, I'll help you and make available to you anything you might need or want. She could see Luca was sincere, and he meant well. Thank you. That means the world, especially now. They'd been so focused on each other, they hadn't noticed the storm had been gaining in strength. A sudden loud rattle as the wind tried to pull the buggy from the back of the truck alerted Luca and Naomi to their situation. Together they looked through the back window. Through the swirling red sand around them, they could see the buggy remained tethered to the truck, although it was being pummeled by the wind and sand and swayed like a tortoise drunk on fermented marula fruit. Naomi squinted through the dust-darkened windscreen. She started the engine and switched on the wipers to get a more unobstructed view. But sand poured onto the windscreen faster than the wipers could move. When she spoke, she tried not to sound panicked. If we go now, we could still make it back to the lodge before the storm hits. Luca pointed off to his left. What about taking shelter under the trees over there? When I was on top of the dune, I saw a dry riverbed flanked by trees in that direction. That won't be a good idea. Many animals will head that way. I don't fancy our chances against a herd of stampeding elephants. Or lions that might keep us captive for goodness knows how long while they shelter under the truck. And if this storm brings with it lightning, as these often do, then we don't want to be anywhere near trees. Trust me. Luca nodded. Naomi eased the truck away from the dune, checking in the rearview mirror that the buggy remained on the back. The volume of the storm increased as they left the soundproof the dune had afforded them. When they were clear of the dune, Naomi drove slowly at first, and then faster as the track became clearer in the full beam of the truck. Suddenly they heard a massive bang, followed immediately by the truck's front wheels sinking on the right-hand side. Naomi and Luca both looked back to see what had happened to the buggy, but Naomi knew what it was. Damn, I think we have a flat tire. I'll check. Luca opened his door. The wind tugged at it. He got out and had to push it shut. Naomi watched as Luca checked the tire on the passenger side first. He gave a smile and a thumbs up. The lights illuminated his jean-clad legs as he walked past the truck's beam to the driver's side. He shook his head and gave a thumbs down before battling against the wind again to get back into the cabin. What now? I'll let the lodge know we won't be able to get back tonight. We'll have to stay here and wait it out. Naomi switched off the engine and reached into the glove compartment to retrieve the walkie-talkie. Kerry's voice crackled over the device, distorted by the storm, no doubt. You guys okay? Naomi raised her voice and spoke as clearly as she could. We're fine, but we're stuck. You... what? Flat tire. Okay. Otayan. Tomorrow morning collect. You... storm... be over then. Okay. Over and out. Naomi put the walkie-talkie back in the glove compartment. Then she lifted a panel on the seat between them. Their provisions were inside a small compartment underneath the seat, neatly stacked, each container individually wrapped with cling film to keep out any potential ants. Coffee? We may as well have some and enjoy the storm while we're here. Luca nodded, but his eyes travelled over the darkening sky around them. And you're sure we'll be safe here? Naomi detected a note of panic in his voice. She wouldn't lie to him to make him feel better. As safe as we can get out here, yes. This truck is very heavy. I don't believe the wind will pick it up as easily or throw us over. These storms aren't like the hurricanes I've seen on the news. We're more likely to suffocate from inhaling so much sand and dust." Luca's head jerked in her direction. Naomi smiled. "Don't worry. I don't think we'll suffocate. While it's true it can happen, I only said it to reassure you." The dubious look on Luca's face made Naomi laugh. "Oh, we'll be fine. We might get a little hot and stuffy, but we'll survive. Coffee?" He accepted the plastic mug she held out to him and took a sip. His eyes smiling over the rim, he winked at her. "I can live with hot and stuffy, as long as it's with you." Naomi felt herself blush. She knew she shouldn't. He'd be her husband. But she still had trouble getting her head around the idea. Watching Luca, Naomi realized he had a sudden sense of just how isolated they were here, cut off from the world in a bubble of their own. It was rather a pleasant feeling, as though they were the only two people in the world. There was no one else she'd want to be alone with in the world more than him. Luca put his empty mug on the dashboard and leaned back. A soft sigh escaped his lips. "We need to talk, don't you think?" Naomi's heart sped up. She could feel her palms getting sweaty from anxiety. She'd been waiting for this moment. Now it was here, she was more apprehensive than she'd imagined. But she lifted her chin, squared her shoulders, and looked into Luca's dark eyes. Auntie Elsa's voice sounded in her mind. "In for a penny, in for a pound." Naomi took the direct approach. "You go first. Why did you change toward me so suddenly before you left?" Luca moved around so he could face her head on, his back against the door, his right arm resting on the top of the seat, and one long leg bent in the space between them. He held her eyes captive as he spoke. "If you recall, I overheard you talking with Kerry. You said something that triggered all my insecurities. Two things, actually. You mentioned that Auntie Elsa had appointed you to look after Santina and me, and..." Realization dawned on Naomi. She turned her body to face Luca, pressing her back into the door on her side. "And you thought our time together was just a matter of duty for me?" Naomi's perceptiveness never ceased to surprise Luca. "Yes, that's it, exactly." She lifted an eyebrow. "Luca, I can't believe you'd even have thought it. Do you think if you were just part of my duties, I'd have spent so much time with you, swimming, going to dinner in Windhoek, and afterward, the jet?" Naomi felt her cheeks flush at her brazenness, mentioning the jet, but she refused to look away from his eyes. Luca seemed embarrassed by his earlier thoughts. He lowered his eyes for moments before looking back into hers again. "I know. That's what I couldn't work out." Naomi continued to look into his eyes as she spoke. "But there is something more, isn't there?" She was his perfect match. That phrase had raced through his brain for the umpteenth time since he'd met her. Married life with her would be unequalled in every way. "Yes." Again, Luca broke eye contact for mere moments before continuing. "I heard you say something like, with his lifestyle and money he can give women anything they want. If you only knew how often I've heard that phrase and how women..." Naomi had a sudden insight into the sadness that remained from the little boy who'd lost his mother to wealth. She leaned towards him, putting a reassuring hand on his arm. "No, Luca, I didn't mean it like that. If you must know, it was one of my insecure moments. Kerry had suggested you gave us the buggy deal because you cared for me. I found it difficult to believe. A man like you, with your lifestyle and your wealth and your privileges, that you would genuinely care for me. But now..." Luca took her hand in his, intertwining his fingers through hers. "But now you know different. Now you know I love you, amore mio. I've never loved anyone as much as I love you. I didn't even know that what love was until you. I know we don't know each other well yet, but I know 100% you are the woman I've been looking for my whole life. Why would you think I wouldn't love you?" It was Naomi's turn to lower her eyes as the heat of embarrassment crept up her neck onto her cheeks. "Well, you know, you're an Italian god and you're my desert princess." Luca leaned forward, closed his eyes, and kissed Naomi ever so softly on her lips, lingering just long enough for them both to experience a physical reaction to the kiss. When he sat back, his pupils had dilated, his nostrils flared, and his breathing was uneven, matching Naomi's reaction exactly. For moments they stared at one another, in awe of each other. A slow smile played around Luca's lips. "Now I've bared my soul to you, don't you think you should do the same?" "What do you mean?" "As I said, we don't know each other yet, and I can't wait to spend the rest of my life getting to know you. For now, though, I want to know why you were so wary around me after the poacher incident." He picked up on that? It surprised Naomi. He must have had feelings for her even then, if he could be that sensitive to her. "It's an old fear, nothing to do with you." "Well, I think it has. You say I changed towards you, but you changed towards me after the incident where the poachers put me in the hospital. Things were never the same between us after that. What happened?" Luca took Naomi's hand in his and stroked his thumb back and forth over her hand as though to comfort her even before she spoke. His voice was soft as he encouraged her. "Tell me." Naomi sighed. She had to be fair to him. He'd been open and honest with her. Now it was her turn. If they were going to be married, there could be no secrets between them. As much as she could, she told him about her deep-seated fear of losing those people whom she loved, as she had her parents. "I couldn't bear the thought of losing you too. It would have been far safer not to love you to begin with." A frown of concern appeared between Luca's eyes, but he listened in silence as he absorbed the information that had shaped so much of Naomi's life and personality. He finally understood how her fears had influenced her behaviour toward him. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her fingers. "Amore mio, that you love me as much as I love you is all I could ask for from life. Death is just a part of life. It doesn't mean your love and your relationship with the person who has died is over. Your parents still love you. They're still there for you. They're just in another dimension. Auntie Elsa will soon go there too, but it doesn't mean she'll stop loving you or caring about you." "Yes, that's what she told me." Naomi told Luca about how excited Auntie Elsa was to meet up with Uncle Wouter again, her soulmate. Luca nodded. "That's as it should be. At the end of our lives we'll follow in their footsteps, because you are my soulmate, amore mio. Nothing, not even death, can keep us apart." Taking Naomi's hand in his, Luca raised it to his lips and kissed her fingers. It was as though nature had conspired to make this moment the most intimate and romantic they could ever have wished for. As the sand covered the truck, the sound of the storm diminished even more. It was the perfect soundproof against the cacophonous sound of the howling wind and the deafening claps of thunder. The lightning that followed sent shards of light across the sky. Naomi knew Luca had experienced nothing as terrifying, as intense, or as thrilling as this storm. That she could share it with him was beyond a bonus. Suddenly, Luca slid off the seat and tried to maneuver his tall body in between the space between the seat and the dashboard. It was a tight fit, but he managed. Naomi watched his amusing behaviour with a smile and a question mark in her eyes. Luca had managed to get himself onto one knee, although he had to lean forward onto the seat in front of him. I know when we left we were in a strange place, and I wasn't sure if you'd allow me back in, but I took a chance anyway. Naomi, amore mio, I had to. I love you more than I've ever loved anyone in my entire life. I couldn't let you go. Now, I'm so glad I listened to my instincts, because we've been able to come to an even better place. So I called Kerry and asked her to check your size. I've had this made, especially for you. I don't know of any better time than this, amore mio. The wild, passionate storm around us matches my feelings for you exactly. Luca produced a small red box. Naomi gasped. Her heart beat at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Happy tears sprung into her eyes. Her hand went to her mouth, obscuring the enormous smile on her lips. Naomi, amore mio, will you please do me the honor of becoming my wife forever and ever? Luca opened the box. Inside, on the deepest red velvet, sat the most beautiful ring Naomi had ever seen. The ring reflected perfectly who she was. The diamond at its center wasn't big and ostentatious, screaming of wealth, but it was perfect, both in size and style. Luca held the ring out to Naomi, expectation and hope naked in his eyes. Tears of happiness glistened in her eyelashes as she nodded, her eyes locked on the dark, intense eyes of the man she loved more than life itself. The smile that lit up Luca's face outdid the lighting outside in its brilliance. Gently, he slipped the ring onto her ring finger. It was a perfect fit. But just as Naomi thought her heart would explode from happiness, she burst out laughing at Luca's contortions as he extricated himself from the small space again. He needed to sit on the seat for the kiss they both wanted to share so badly, the kiss that would seal their engagement. When he finally sat next to her again, the magic returned as he took her face in his hands and kissed her lips. At first, his lips were soft, but as their kiss deepened, so did their desire. Their breathing came fast and ragged, amplified in the small cabin. With a sensual groan, Luca pulled Naomi closer to him. But the confines of the cabin prevented any satisfying contact. When they broke apart, their chests heaving, their lips bruised, Naomi had never wanted him more. Luca's eyes burned into hers as his passion matched hers. She loved how he showed his uninhibitedness by touching his arousal through his jeans, pinching the head of his penis to relieve the pressure and frustration. It was such a shocking thing, yet he handled it so matter-of-fact that it seemed natural. That he'd locked his eyes on hers, desire naked in them, while he was doing it, was more surprising. He growled at her, his voice deep and throaty. Then a wicked grin curled around his mouth. You taste just as delicious as I remember. They laughed, and then more, at their synchronicity. Luca scooted nearer his door and pulled Naomi into his body so she was lying across the single seat they shared. His chest felt hard and safe under her head, his heartbeat slowing gradually as his excitement diminished. After he'd kissed the top of her head, he leaned back against the window. Outside, the storm had intensified. The truck was being pummeled by the ferociousness of the wind as it howled around them and tried to get a grip on the vehicle. The buggy on the back was swaying faster, as though dancing to a quick beat, but remained where it was. Many branched flashes of lightning followed the rhythm of the deafening thunder. It was too dark to see if night had already fallen, and neither wore watches. Curious, Naomi leaned forward and turned the key in the ignition. It was only 8 o'clock. Luca leaned against Naomi and peered at the time. Do you think the storm will last all night? Maybe. Are you hungry? Luca's eyes held a mischievous glint, but Naomi pretended not to notice. It would be a very frustrating night for them both otherwise. After dinner, They made themselves comfortable. Naomi again lay against Luca's chest. He'd leaned back against the door to make as much room for her on the seat as possible. His arms were around her, their fingers intertwined, as he held her as close as he could. Thank you for listening, thank you for watching, thank you for liking and sharing my videos, and most of all, thank you very much for subscribing to my channel. Until next time.